The El Niño trade, a global market analysis by Overleaf AI. We are witnessing a convergence of climate and capital. In a world of increasing volatility, the ability to decode the intersection of environmental physics and institutional finance is the ultimate edge. Right now, half the world's soft commodity supply is sitting under a single weather system. A super El Niño is forming. The markets are beginning to wake up to the extreme risk. This isn't just about weather, it's about a structural failure in the global supply chain. In India, the monsoon is already failing. The foundation of global food security is being tested by environmental instability that few analysts fully grasp. Sugar, coffee, orange juice, and rice. The four pillars of the soft commodity market are facing a unified high-intensity threat. When the climate moves, the supply chain breaks. This is the setup where the systematic trader finds the most explosive opportunities. This is a high-probability setup. One driver, four markets. At Overleaf AI, we focus on the structure of the trade, not the noise of the headlines. We look for factor stacks leaning the same way. When supply is this concentrated, the market reaction is institutional, violent, and predictable. To trade this effectively, you must understand the underlying mechanics. This is how the Pacific Ocean moves the global economy. The mechanism is precise. It begins in the Pacific and ripples through every major port and exchange on the planet. Atmospheric circulation is the delivery system for commodity price volatility. Here is how the climate-capital coupling works. Under normal conditions, trade winds blow warm water west across the Pacific, pooling near Indonesia. That's where the rain belt lives. This heat pool fuels the monsoons. It is the primary engine of agricultural production for Southeast Asia, Australia, and the Indian subcontinent. When this system is stable, global soft commodity prices remain within their historical ranges. But the system is no longer stable. In an El Niño, those trade winds give out. The warm water sloshes back east across the ocean, dragging the rain belt with it. The shift is total. The entire planetary rain distribution is realigned, creating winners and losers in the global agricultural market. The magnitude of the shift determines the severity of the shock. We are currently tracking an anomaly of historic proportions. The results are immediate. Drying across India and Australia. But Brazil often sees a lag, a critical delay in the realization of supply risk. This regional mismatch creates the trading window. You see the move coming before it's priced into the Brazilian supply forecast. The institutional edge lies in identifying this lag. We position for the realization of drought before the harvest reports confirm it. Institutional positioning happens in this window. The supply constraints are visible in the climate long before they hit the ports. The lag is the edge. By the time the world notices the sacks of rice aren't being loaded, the major price move is already behind us. We use climate as a leading indicator for capital flows. This is the precision of the El Niño trade. We position early. Look at the correlations on the historical tape. High-intensity ENSO cycles dictate the price structure of the entire softs market. The data doesn't lie. When the Pacific warms to this degree, the fundamental floor of the market moves. The structure remains intact. Most analysts look at historical averages, but the history books are lying to you. Averaging a weak El Niño with a super event is useless. We only care about the super events. They rewrite the map. The distribution itself is moving, sliding toward more extreme results. A weak event is noise. A super event is a regime change. Knowing the difference is the first step in commodity valuation. The distribution is moving. The oceans are warmer now, providing more fuel. The tail risk for extreme events has doubled since the 1960s. Since the 60s, the amplitude of these swings has increased significantly. We are trading in a new, more volatile climate regime. This is the modern reality. The old rules of mean reversion are being rewritten by the thermal energy of a warming ocean. This is the modern ENSO distribution. It hits harder, faster, and more frequently than anything analysts in the 90s expected. The intensity of this cycle is already matching the great shocks of the past. The structural deficit is already baked into the crops. We are tracking record-breaking energy flux. The climate is moving capital with a force that traditional finance often ignores. The reason climate moves capital so effectively is concentration. Two countries effectively control the supply switch for the entire basket. Brazil and India. They sit on the choke points. When production fails here, there is no backup supply. The global market is left short. Concentration is the transmission mechanism. It takes a local moisture variance and turns it into a global price event. Brazil produces 35% of the world's coffee and nearly 75% of its orange juice exports. It is the vital center of the global softs trade. India is the number 2 sugar producer and the top rice exporter. This concentration creates a systematic vulnerability we can trade. The whole planet's breakfast is grown by just 2 nations. This is the fundamental structure of the El Niño trade. From the highlands of Brazil to the rice paddies of India, the supply chain is a fragile, high-efficiency machine. The infrastructure is tuned for optimal conditions. When El Niño disrupts those conditions, the entire logistics network fails. Drought here doesn't just mean a poor harvest, it means a structural shift in global trade flows and national policy. Rice is the most sensitive switch. India controls 40% of the trade. When the government panics about food security, they slam the door. A 40% choke point is a loaded spring. When India stops shipping, the rest of the world's supply cannot fill the gap. Prices explode. This is a policy-driven market move. We don't just track the rain, we track the political reflex of the nations that control the supply. In 2023, the non-basmati export ban sent global rice prices to a 15-year high overnight. This is the reflexivity of a choke point. The supply disappeared overnight. The world was left chasing a disappearing inventory, driving prices into a parabolic arc. Food security is the ultimate driver. When a government must choose between feeding its people and global trade, they choose survival. Sugar is following a similar path. India has restricted exports until 2026. Domestic supply piles up while the global market tightens. The domestic price in India falls as supply is trapped while the world price explodes. It's a fundamental fact, not a forecast. We've seen this before. The pattern is repeating with even greater structural weakness in the underlying global inventory. In the orange juice market, we see the darkest trend. Climate pressure meets citrus greening, a generational production collapse. Florida's industry has been effectively erased. Brazil, the world's largest grower, now has nearly half its citrus belt infected. The infection is systematic. The industry is facing a terminal decline that no weather cycle can reverse. This is structural risk. This is a one-way street. There is no mean reversion for diseased trees. The structural supply is in a state of permanent decline. The supply isn't coming back. The El Niño trade simply accelerates a process that was already fundamentally broken. We trade the decay. The juice in your breakfast is now a premium asset. Understanding the disease floor is the key to positioning in the OJ market. But successful trading requires discipline. Cheap is an abused word. We define it systematically against an asset's own history. We measure every asset against its own multi-year range and its own floor. We look for cheap versus itself, not versus a guess. Is it cheap compared to its own decade of history? That is the only question that matters for a systematic setup. Knowing your position in the distribution is the difference between a systematic setup and a gamble. We trade the structure. Probability, structure, timing. These are the pillars of the Overleaf AI framework. The setup determines the outcome. We don't chase price. We identify the structural conditions that make price movement inevitable. This is institutional discipline. The El Niño trade is live. The Pacific moves the switch, but the systematic valuation determines the precision of the entry. Probability, structure, timing. Navigate the global macro markets with precision. This is Overleaf AI. The El Niño trade, a global market analysis by Overleaf AI. Precision in a changing world.